The aspect of ייבום in our days, which is the Levite marriage, is somehow controversial. If you go by the code, we, meaning the Ashkenazic community, which follow the Rema, Rabbi Moshe P, we do not have an active act of ייבום. For those who are not familiar, we have a discussion here over two brothers. We're just calling names, Reuven and Shimon. And Reuven married, just making name, Tamar. Reuven had no children with Tamar, and he passed. And now Shimon has the obligation, the moral, etc. obligation to redeem the soul of the deceased by marry the Yevamah, Tamar. So nowadays, as we said, Ashkenazi community who follow the Rema do not do that. In the state of Israel since 48, they don't do that. If it happens in the past, as far as I know, was very rare in Ashkenazi community, and it was known for the future generation. Sephardim, however, the Eastern Jews, does have act of ייבום, and the Yemenite Jews, they do have act of ייבום, but as we said, the code, the Rema tells us in Even Ezer Kuf Samechei 165, chapter 165, that we as Ashkenazi don't do it. The obvious question is, so what do we do? The answer is וחליצה. We let Tamar comes out with act of, as we said, removing the shoe, and let her marry whoever she wish out of the family. The question we're going to discuss a little deeper than the previous session is why? Since the Torah commanded us, it's part of the 613th commandment, to act in a Levite manner when it's a family and is a deceased brother that have no perpetuation of his soul, why in our days we don't practice ייבום? I'm speaking in particular Ashkenazi who follow the school of thought of Rema. The answer. So let's look on page 39b, 15 lines from the bottom of the page. בראשונה שהיו מתכוונים לשם מצווה, מצוות ייבום קודמת למצוות חליצה. At the ancient times, when people are really sincerely intent for the mitzvah of ייבום, so the feeling was that mitzvah ייבום take precedent before mitzvah וחליצה. Again, I apologize for those who are familiar. I'm just going to give a 30-second words for those who are not familiar. The Torah gives us a list of prohibition in Leviticus 18. A prohibition against relation between father and daughter, prohibition against immediate family relations. One of them is a prohibition against relation between the brother's wife. So if it's Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven married Tamar, Shimon prohibited by Torah law to cohabitate with Tamar, the wife of Reuven. On the contrary, the Torah tells us in Deuteronomy 25, if Reuven passed with no children, since he is no longer among the living, the brother Shimon has the obligation, the biblical mitzvah, to redeem the soul by marrying Tamar. That's called ייבום, Levite marriage. If he refused to do it, then is the ritual involved with the shoe, etc., that release Tamar to go out and marry whoever she wished to. So originally speaking, when people meant to do this mitzvah, meaning the sincere sake of perpetuation of the soul of the deceased, therefore they said the mitzvah of ייבום, Levite marriage, take precedent before the mitzvah of וחליצה. ועכשיו שאין מתכוונים לשם מצווה, now unfortunately, when people does not have that intent, soon you see example, but in a very general term, Shimon maybe he likes Tamar bodies, he maybe likes Tamar bank account, right? He maybe wants to be famous because of family involved with Hollywood or who knows what, right? Other motivation rather than redeem the soul, the deceased soul of Reuven, who's no longer among the living, and by marrying her and having children together is a continuation, hopefully the child named after the deceased brother, and it will be a continuation of the deceased. That's not in the average person's mind. And therefore, Amru, the sages said, forget it. Mitzvat וחליצה קודמת למצוות ייבום. We go the other way around, and the mitzvah of וחליצה is now preferable to the mitzvah of ייבום. So let's elaborate. אמר רמי בר חמא אמר רבי יצחק, חזרו לומר מצוות ייבום קודמת למצוות וחליצה. They went back to the old business. No, ייבום is more. אמר לרב נחמן בר יצחק, הקשור דרי. Oh, wait a second. All of a sudden, you know what you're telling me? That our generation went back, and we are now Balei Tshuva, and we are now righteous people, and we are now intent, the sincere idea of continuation of the soul, so we go back to be higher than the previous generation, so now you reverse the reverse, and tells me that the Yibum is more important than Chalitza? Me'ikara savrei la ka'aba shul. Listen carefully, now we touching a nerve. Now it's a crucial part of this tractate, so please listen carefully. Me'ikare savrei la ka'aba shul, ulvasov savrei la k'rabanan דתניא. אבא שאול אומר, הכונס את יבימתו לשם נוי. If Shimon went ahead and intent or married Tamar for the purpose of her body, beauty, or for the purpose uleshum ishut, he wants people to say that he's married, all right? Or Tosfot said either that he likes the idea of people call him married man, or other intent, as we said, he likes her bank account, he likes to be part of her family, whatever it is. כאילו פוגע בערווה, meaning now Abba Shaul said we go to a reverse order. He is now in a violation of Leviticus 18. He is now have cohabitation, almost illicit cohabitation of the brother's wife. Because remember what happened? When his brother married, before he passed, to Tamar, she was totally prohibited to him. It's called erva. Now, because his motivation is not pure, he is close to that violation, to that notion. Vekarovani, you see, when you use the word vekarovani, it's not there, but it means I am there, I am almost close there, and my eyes is, in my eyes he hold. Be'enai liot havalad mamzer. You go to the extreme, and he says, you know what I feel? That the baby that come out of that cohabitation is mamzer, is illegitimate. To the extreme, right? V'chachamim omrim, the majority of the sages disputed Abba Shaul, and they said in Deuteronomy 25, Yevama yavo aleha. The Torah said, here Yavam shall cohabit with her and perform Yibum with her. The answer is, Mikol makom. Come on. You don't go to a person's mind. Leave him alone. Leave Shimon alone. What his intent? What his intent is his business. He comes and he said he wants to marry her. Goodbye. That's it. So the majority of the sages said, we accept it, whatever it is. So as far as the halacha, in general, we said, and this is something we're going to study on page 53, that even Shimon was not in a sincere intent. We go to the extreme, even L'Shem Znut, which means it was some manner of adultery, some manner of inappropriate relationship. But since is legitimate marriage, in a sense, she is a widow, she have no children with deceased brother, etc., etc. So we go by the sages who disputed Abba Shaul, and we said, bediavad, after the fact, the Yibum take effect, and that's the way most of the rabbis, the Rif, the Ritva, goes in that way. the Aruch HaShulchan in Kuf Samechei in Even HaEzer 165 hold that way. That basically, and you see it also in Knesset HaGdolah, that most of the rabbis hold that way. So again, as we said earlier, in a practical manner, State of Israel do not go that way. Right? The Sephardim, the Temanim, yes. The Ashkenazim not. The Ashkenazim go by the Ramah. But you see that, if you want to be very honest with this, you see the depth of Abba Shaul and where he's coming from and what is his concern. Man tana lehadetanu Rabbanan. Who is the one who hold that way? Yevama yavo alea mitzvah. Shebat chila, before Reuven took Tamar, she was basically allowed to Shimon. Hayta alav bichlal heter. She was like other women, right? Ne'esra, the moment Reuven betrothed Tamar, she was now the brother's wife. So she is prohibited to Shimon. V'chazra ve'utra, as a result of Reuven's passing, now Tamar is ready to do Yibum. She has Zikat Yibum to Shimon. Yachol tachzor leheitera rishon. The Braita asks, maybe she go to the original status. Which is the original status? A free woman that they just meet outside. Talmud lomar Yevama yavo aleha. The Torah said clearly, the Yavam should come and go with her. Mitzvah. Man Tana. Rashi asks, who is the Tana and what is his intent? What exactly he teaches in this Braita? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Abba Shaul. This is the one who teaches this Braita. So according to his view, whenever you betroth this Yevamah, it has to be with a sincere, total intent of fulfilling the mitzvah. And anyone else is pgi'a be'isur erva. It's in a violation of Leviticus 18. Attachment to that, like a magnet. V'hachei ke'amar, Yevamah yavo elea, mitzvah. Abba Shaul said that it has to be for the sake of mitzvah of Yibum solely and only. And then he said, Shebat chila hayta alav bichlal heter. We trace back, let's say, X amount of years ago. So this Tamar allows to Reuven, allows to Shimon. It's just another woman. רצה לשם נוי, כונסה. רצה לשם מישות, כונסה. You meet a girl, you want her money, you want her family, you want her fame, you want whatever you want. You want to be connected to her father, to her mother, to her family, whatever it is. Business, whatever you have in your mind. Fine. It's a free world, a free whatever. Go. And then what happened is, Ne'esra, the moment his brother betrothed her, it's a total in a list of violation of Leviticus 18, which is have any relation with the brother's wife. Chazra ve'utra lo. Since his brother Reuven lost his life unfortunately with no children, so now she is allowed to him, but with a certain limitation. Yachol tachzor leitera rishon. You may think that now she's going back to the original status. Talmud lomar Yevama yavo alea leshem mitzvah. So it means the Ramban tells us that those who hold that Abba Shaul is biblical. So it's biblical with all the stringency of biblical. Has to be for the mitzvah. Those who hold that Abba Shaul is rabbinic, that's basically the Ritva and others. So they say that that's asmachta, which means that's a support point from the Torah. But you see the sensitivity and the concern that Abba Shaul has, which have the resonate in our heart and mind throughout this tractate, throughout this masechet. How deep is it? Rava Amar. Rava go a little different in his explanation. He says, Afilu teima Rabbanan. Even you go by those majority of the sages who disputed Abba Shaul and said, you are to the extreme. V'hareke amar Yevama yavo elea mitzvah, which means there is a mitzvah to do, the Levite married, Shebat Chila, that originally speaking, the brother of the Yavam betrothed, Haita Bichlal Heter. She was, as we said earlier, like everyone else. Ratza konsa, Ratza eino konsa, you have a choice. And then, Ne'esra, the moment that Reuven betrothed her, and then his brother's wife, Chazra v'utra, when Reuven passed, Yachol tachzor le'tera harishon, Ratza konsa, Ratza eino konsa. You may thinking, okay, forget it. Reuven passed. Reuven never had children. So now Tamar is a regular single woman, and that's it. You have a choice. He wants to marry you. It's a free, b'chira chofshit, is a free choice. So the Gemara stops at the middle of the sentence and says, what do you mean? Ratza eino konsa? You mean to say that he can leave her alone? Wait a second. Ha'agida ba. It's a concept of zikat ייבום. It's a concept of ייבום ban. That's the whole discussion in this tractate. Bichdi tipuk, what is a hefker? What is a, you can tell me that she can, this is an option to do, option, zikat ייבום, וחליצה, whatever. Ela eima, you have to say, Ratza konsa. Ratza choletz la, that's the Rabbanon. Talmud lomar, that we prefer ייבום, Yevama yavo alea mitzvah, which means that's back to old business, that ייבום is preferable, is wishable, is advisable, is the way that we wish to, and meaning the essence of Deuteronomy 25 is the mitzvah of Levite marriage. It's preferable and take precedence and more important than the whole aspect of Chalitzah. Chalitzah in that sense is only by force of circumstance. The Torah did not initiate the whole concept of Chalitzah at the first place. Chalitzah was just to show that we stuck with her and we want her to have a future, bright future, and therefore we do Chalitzah. But the whole notion is begin with the mitzvah of ייבום, and therefore ייבום take precedent before Chalitzah. Now, meaning, according to what we understand from this explanation of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, we'll learn that the mitzvah of ייבום has to be with the essence of sincerity of the mitzvah. Now we're going to juxtapose other learning from other sources. And now we're going to, for a moment, just a moment, hold on, to a different mitzvah, and we're going to juxtapose, we're going to compare that to our discussion. And here we are now traveling to book of Vayikra, Leviticus, chapter 6. There is a concept, it's called Sharei Mincha. What is Sharei Mincha? There is a korban, one of the offering, that is called Mincha. It's an offering involved with food. And that Mincha, usually, batel im korbanot. This is incorporate with other offering, but is considered on the list of Kodshei Kodashim. If you pay attention, you see on the list we said in the korbanot every day, that's under that category. So the Kohanim come in, they do the kmitza, if you learn, and it's al gava mizbeach, on the top of the altar, and you have the shiraim, the leftover, ne'echal ba'azara, it's eaten in the temple courtyard, the same as chatat and asham, the same as the sin offering and guilt offering. Shiarei mincha, the Torah says that what left over from the mincha, ve'anoteret, the Torah said, yochlu mimena Aaron uvanav, and then the Torah said, matzot te'achel b'makom kadosh. So they said should be eaten unleavened, in the holy place, which means you have to eat it inside the sanctuary, and the framework of unleavened bread, matzot, and it means that it's the idea of mitzvah. page 40, שבתחילה הייתה עליו בכלל היתר. Originally, before the content of the mincha were ever sanctified, it was included in that which was permitted to him, the Kohen, for consumption, which means this is basically solid, so everyone can buy it. Now, ne'esra, the moment that it's sanctified, is prohibited because this turned to be Kodshei Kodashim, turned to be part of the Isur Meila, which means that the prohibition of misuse. Vechazra vehutra, now it turn around, and when we lift up the comets, when we lift up that, and then the comets was removed and burned on the altar, it again became permitted to him. Now you may think, because of that, since it turned to the original, Yachol tachzor le'tera rishon. So since after the haktara, after they put the incense, so you go back to the original status, and it's allowed the same as unconsecrated food, chulin, Talmud lomar, which means allowed to lechol haolam, to everyone. Talmud lomar, matzot te'achel b'makom kadosh, it shall be eaten unleavened in the holy place, which means only ba'azara, only zichrei kuna bechol makom mitzvah, which means that it is prohibited. So what you see here, when you compare this to the others, you may say that the same way as in ייבום, you can compare to the idea of going back to the original status. That's the goal so far. Wait, but we going to challenge that. Bishlama lerava, if you go by the Seifa in regards to Biat ייבום, the Amar Hamani Rabbanani, that he hold that you cannot do ייבום without the sincere kavanah. Hacha, here in regards to comparing to Shirei Mincha, Hachi Kamar. Matzot te'achel b'makom chadosh, mitzvah. The mitzvah is that the Kohen lechatchila, it's not optional, shebat chila, before the mincha is sanctified. Hayta alav bichlal eter, it's part of the unsanctified food. Ratza ochla, ratza eno ochla, which means it's not necessarily specifically for the purpose of eating. Ne'esra, the moment that it's sanctified, is prohibited to him. Chazra v'rutra lo, after you uplifted the comets and put it as an incense, Yachol tachzor le'tera rishon, that it will be the same as unsanctified, the same as chulin. Ratza ochla, ratza en ochla, and we jump here the same as we jumped before. Ratza en ochla. What does that mean? V'aktiv, they said clearly in the book of Shmot, in the book of Numbers, book of Exodus, chapter 29, ve'achlu otam asher kupar bahem melamed. So it's written there, but they shall eat them, those who gain atonement through them. Melamed, we derive from that, שהכהנים אוכלים, that the Kohanim eat the sacrifice, ובעלים מתכפרים, only then the honor gain atonement. So it means part of the honor of that offering, the atonement for that, completed by having the Kohanim eating from that offering. So that's the idea, asher kupar bahem. Rashi said that's specifically for the pe'ulat ha'achila, for the action of eating it. So part of the atonements is the eating. So it's not in a sense ratza, optional. Chayav, he has to. Ela ratza hu ochla. רצה כהן אחר אוכלה. תלמוד לומר מצות תאכל במקום קדוש, מצווה. Which means that's לכתחילה. The one who avad, the one who did it, he is the one who need to do it. And that's in a way compare, at least at the first glance, to the story of the ייבום. אלא לרב יצחק ברב דימי דאמר אבא שאולי, and according to Abba Shaul, it's a prohibition if it's l'shem noi, if it's l'shem ishut, if it's any other purposes but not the mitzvah of perpetuation of the deceased soul. Hacha, here in regards to eating leftover of the mincha offering, my trei gavnei ika, what type of two options you have in eating of leftover the mincha, which means this idea that the Kohen can eat regardless, and we have the pasuk of matzot teachel, which means you have to go specifically in that way. Which means regardless if he is hungry and he wants to eat, or when he's not, makes no difference. So in general, the Meiri said in Tractate Yevamot that there is a certain restriction with the manner of eating, because there are those who say that when it's not achila gasa, meaning someone who's like very, I don't know if it's the right word, but vulgaric in his manner of eating, right?
Gluttonous,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, achila gasa mishma achila. So you're going to tell me that for gluttonous eating, consider eating at all. ואמר ריש לקיש, האוכל אכילה גסה ביום הכיפורים. Meaning, if someone, as the Rashi tells us in Yoma, page 80, someone is ate before the entrance of the day, which is the mitzvah to eat a lot, and then after the day begin, when he's still, the stomach is full, but he is like, whatever, I don't want to use the word, right? Continue eating when it's already Yom Kippur. Patur elo tune. He says he's exempt from having violated the prohibition of you should not afflict yourself. Now, you think about it. Actually, it's Yom Kippur, but remember, his belly is filled.
Right.
So in that sense, Reish Lakish at least not hold that achila gasa, this type of gluttonous, is considering a regular manner of eating. Ela. Ratza matzah ochla, ratza chametz ochla. You meant to tell me that if he wants to eat it, the mincha, as unleavened bread, if you want to eat it as a chametz, regardless, he can do it either way. So that we rejected. Why? Ve'aktiv, the Torah said clearly and lucidly in Leviticus 6, lo te'afeh chametz chelkam. It shall not be baked as leaven, as a chametz, their portion. ואמר ריש לקיש, ואפילו חלקם, and even portion, לא תהפך חמץ, cannot baked as leaven. So since you have a clear state that we are prohibited to eat leftover of mincha in a matter of chametz, you don't need the pasuk matzot teachel b'makom kadosh, and therefore, by force of circumstance, you cannot say that we are speaking here about chametz. Ela ratza matzah ochla, ratza chalut ochla. If he wants to eat it in an ordinary baked matzah, he can eat it. If he wants to eat it as a skillet bread, he can eat it. So, meaning, he cannot do it in a hot way. So the main idea is the way the Baal HaMaor explained in Pesachim 11, it means that when you put it in a very hot temperature, so it changed the status. That's the whole idea of ma'afeh tanur. So he said, Hai chalut echedami. Give me an example of scaled bread. I matzahi hamatzaktiv. V'i lo matzahi matzot amarachmana. So you don't need to have the scaled bread derived from matzot teachel. Gemara said, "Lo, it's not an issue. Why? Le'olamei malach matzahi." You have to say that it is matzah, and that's part of the category of the word matzah. In regard to the question how you derive from the word matzot teachel, ulehachet tana beikra, and that's the reason why we have the pasuk in regard to leftover from mincha, to mean to say le'akev, that if you do not eat it in the manner of regular full matzah, so then is an issue. It's le'akev, which means you cannot fulfill the mitzvah. Ela chalut matzah ide ke'amrinan lemayin hilcheta. But when you say that scaled bread is from the matzah, what is the practical halacha from that? Lomar, to teach us she'adam yotze ba yedei chovato bepesach, which means if you eat this scaled bread, it's still considering as fulfilling the mitzvah of eating it on Pesach, to eat matzah on Pesach, af al pi, even though dechaltei meikara, even here it is first scaled, keivan dehadarav yeh betanura, since he later baked it in the oven, lechem oni karina bei. We call it what the Torah said in Deuteronomy 16, the bread of affliction, the poor man, the indigent man bread, ve'adam yotze b'yedei chovato b'Pesach. So a person fulfilled the mitzvah on Pesach by eating it. So over there in Pesachim 36, we said prat lechalut, to exclude the scale bread. So how come they allow here? So the Tos will bring an answer from Rabbeinu Tam that over there is chalut, that did not re-baked him. And the others said that the Ritva said that it changes status because when you do it several times, it's no longer bread of affliction, it's already matzah shira. It's many explanations. The Meiri have explanation. So I always, by the way, fascinating with the concept of Pesach, because all the other nations, when it's come to the Independence Day or the Day of Freedom, they march on the street with ammunition. By us, in Pesach, we have the bread of affliction, the bread of poverty, and we open our heart and homes for people who need, and we said, this is the matzah, this is the bread of affliction. So anyway, here the concern, according to those views, as we said, the Meiri and others, by rebaking it, you change the status. It's in a way no longer bread of affliction. Anyway, Mishnah. Next Mishnah, dealing with inheritance. We explained several times. From the book of Ruth, for example, you remember the story with Ploni and Boaz. So originally Ploni, or maybe Tov, wanted to redeem Ruth because he's the closest king. And then when he hears that there's a property involved and the responsibility, so some say the opposite. Originally he wants to do it because of the property. When he involved, we understand that he must marry Ruth, then he backed off. So you see, sometimes it's a package deal, right? Hacholetz livimto, if someone perform וחליצה to his Yevamot, so for our understanding is Shimon and Tamar, right? He did וחליצה. So by doing that, he is equal to all the other brothers. הרי הוא כאחד מן האחים לנחלה. When it's come to inheritance, he is the same as all the others. Later we explain what is it. ואם יש שם אב, if the father of those brothers, Reuven, Shimon, etc., he is alive, נכסים של אב, which means the father take precedence before others. That's in general the biblical concept of Yerusha, of inheritance, that you go first by the oldest one. הכונס את יבימתו זכה בנכסים של אחיו. Meaning, even if the mother of the father is alive, the one who did married to Yevamah, he gained his deceased brother the estate or whatever involved there, the property, the money, etc. Rabbi Yehuda said, regardless if he did the וחליצה or he did the ייבום, אם יש עם אב, if the father of the brothers is alive, נכסים של אב, which means, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you tell me that the brother who does ייבום with the wife of the deceased inherited his entire properties, that's only if the property fall before the brothers, meaning when the father was not around. But if the father is alive, Rabbi Yehuda said that the whole concept of inheritance of the Yavam, the father inherited what belonged to his son regardless. So the Gemara said Pshita, that's obvious, which means why you thought that someone who does וחליצה will lose his right of inheritance. inheritance. Sal kadata chamina. Without the Mishnah, you may enter to your mind וחליצה במקום ייבום קיימה ונשקול כל הנכסי. That וחליצה is equivalent to ייבום, and therefore the one who perform וחליצה take all the properties the same as someone who does the ייבום. So Rashi tells us, I explain in my book, ביאורי כלומר ברש"י על הש"ס. Rashi said, כלומר, לאו לאשמועינן דלא איבד זכותו תניא ליה. In the language of the Mishnah, we may thought that since the one who did the וחליצה, he loses his right of inheritance. So the Tana tells us, no, it's one of the brothers. So therefore, the question is, what's the difference between him and all the others? So Rashi tells us here that you should not think because he went to that notion of וחליצה is any change of his status, meaning it's either less or better. He says he's just equal to all the others. I elaborate on that here. Anyway, kamash melan. So therefore the Tana teaches us that by stating that the brother who performed the וחליצה divides the dead brother's estate together with the other surviving brothers, rather than inheriting it exclusively. The Gemara rejected that and said, if that's the case, הרי הוא כאחד מן האחים, אינו אלא כאחד מן האחים מבא אלי. So you should say that he is only like one of the other brothers, אלא סלקא דתחא מנעול והפסדה מייבום, since he caused her to lose the possibility of ייבום. Guess what? Liknesei, we should penalize him and bar him from inheritance at all. Kamash melan. Therefore we said no. Look, people have the right to do. In that sense, he exercised his right not to do ייבום. Fine, he's not losing the rights. Im yesham av, the Marmar, this is a famous statement in Baba Batra, page 115. Av kodem lechol yotzei recho, a father take precedence over all of his descendants, which means if a person have no future generation, excuse me, it's very cold outside, not sons, no daughters, no grandchildren, right? So the father inherited his belonging. And if the father is no longer among the living, then the brothers will go and inherit it. But as long as he have a future generation, can be grandchildren, so therefore they inherited and not his father. The Mishnah said it means he is before his children, but not before the children of his son. That's the Gemara in Baba Batra, page 116. So here in our Mishnah speak about a situation that he unfortunately have no future generation. Why? Because the merely fact that his wife, the living wife, needs a ייבום. So therefore the father can inherit his belonging. Hakoneset Yevimto. So he said that he has the right over the properties of his brother. Maitama yakum al shem achiv amar Rachamana. The Torah, the merciful Torah, it's called Rachmana. They said that he shall go by the name of the deceased brother, which means Vahareika, which means that this is basically the inheritance of the brother. That's based on the emotional story of Ruth. That even it wasn't real case of direct ייבום, but that's what happened with the great kindness of Boaz. Anyway, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, regardless. So Marula, so he said, regardless to what the situation, he said, if there is a father there, let's go to the father. Rabbi Yehuda disputed, and he said, as long as you have, when the father was not around, but otherwise, the Yavam doesn't inherit it. אמרו לה הלכה כרבי יהודה, וכן אמר רבי יצחק בנפחא הלכה כרבי יהודה. ואמרו לה, ויתמה רבי יצחק בנפחא מייתמא דרבי יהודה, דכתיב, because it's written, והיה הבכור אשר תלד. The Torah said clearly that when, and it shall be the firstborn, if she can bear. Kivchor, like Bechor, like a firstborn. Ma Bechor, the same way as the firstborn, although entitled to an extra share of the inheritance, has none of it during the father's lifetime, en lo b'chayei ha'av, hainamei ein lo b'chayei ha'av. So also the Yavam has nothing of the inheritance during the father's lifetime. Ma bechor notel pi shnayim. If so just as the firstborn receives a double portion of his father's inheritance after his father's death, af hay notel pi shnayim lachar mitatav. So the Yavam should receive a double portion of his father's inheritance after his father's death. So the Gemara elaborates and said why you cannot say it. Mi de yakum al shem aviv ktiv, yakum al shem achiv ktiv, velo al shem aviv. It's written that the Yavam is not inheritance of his brother inheritance only when it's come on the name of his name to do this ייבום. Eima heicha deleika'av, which means when the brother passed, there is no father. So therefore, delishkol nachala, that the one who does ייבום can take the inheritance of the deceased, titkayem mitzvat ייבום. Heicha deika'av lo shakil nachala, when you have the father, when the brother passed, so then the one who does ייבום cannot take the inheritance, lo titkayem mitzvat ייבום, the mitzvah of ייבום cannot take place, because in the mitzvah of ייבום the Torah said clearly that the Yavam inherits the property of his brother. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, what we understand, that applies solely when the father was not around. So why we should not say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Torah said when you cannot fulfill the law of inheritance, which means when the father is around, so the mitzvah of ייבום is not applicable, because the Ritva said it may be attached to each other. The Yerusha of the ייבום, and again, I think that the story of Boaz and Ruth has a lot to do with that, because you see the original statement, when Boaz approached Ploni Almoni and he told him there's a property involved, the man showed interest. And the moment the story of it's included marrying Ruth, he backed off. So the Ritva said, maybe he entered to remind that it's connected to each other. So the Gemara said, Mide ייבום בנחלה תלה רחמנה. You may think that the Torah then hinged that the mitzvah of ייבום upon his coming into his brother's inheritance. So ייבום מייב מי. ואי כנחלה שכולי, ואי לא שקיל. So otherwise, so he cannot take. יתיב רבי חנינא קמי דרבי ירמיה. So he said before Rabbi Yirmiyah, because he was very erudite, that's the Gemara in Tani 27. Which means that the Yavam cannot inherit it when is a father around, he cannot inherit the property of the deceased. Amar lei puk krei karyach levara en halacha keRabbi Yehuda. He said, you shouldn't say that in a Beit HaMidrash, get out. You can't say that. The halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda in this case. Second incident. Tana Tanei Kamei de Rav Nachman en halacha keRabbi Yehuda. Amar lei ela keman. So according to him, kerabanan. Pshita yachid verabim halacha kerabim. Right? We know when there is a disputation. You always go. I must tell you, one of my sons, no names, when he knows that I'm very strict that every Suda should have a Divrei Torah, and he's always in a rush, God bless him, so he always said that Yachid verabim halacha kerabim shir hamalot, right? Because it's actually is a Dvar Torah. So the idea is when you have the majority views and individual, so you go by the majority, right? It's a short halacha, right? Amar lei isamye. so I should take it out. אמר לי לא, את הלכה התנייך, ומוק שהוא דאק שלך. It's yachid verabim is one individual against many, so you go by the majority, right? Ve'apacht, and you should go the other way, which is halacha is not kirab Yehuda. They are opposite to the man de'apacht shapira pacht, and the one having reversed it is doing it right that they turn it the other way around. So Rashi explained to us that he meant to say that the halacha is not according to Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore you go by the reverse order. That's basically also the halachot gdolot in 31 in the Ritva, Mishnah. Acholets leivimto, one who performed וחליצה to his yevama, who asur bikrovotea v'asura bikrovav. Don't think for a second that because you did that, then you go ahead and go to other immediate family members. The moment you did that, you cannot marry her relatives, and it go without saying that the brother who performed וחליצה is forbidden to marry the close relative of the חלוצה, the woman who received וחליצה, by the Rabbanan, by the rabbinic law, and the same way is the reverse order, והיא אסורה בקרובותיו. So later the Mishnah explained that in the essence of the law, a person cannot prohibit it with the relative of חלוצה. The Mishnah speaks about rabbinic law because people can come to mistake that they marry to the divorcee relatives. The moment that it's prohibited the relative of his wife, it's go in both ways. So it applies when a person divorces his wife, it applies to chalutz and chalutza. In general, you don't have this isur of krovim when it's come to chalutz or chalutza, because when it's a zikat ייבום, it's not considering a wife, but the sages are concerned that people start belittle everything, and therefore they feel that the relative of the chalutza are free and they can mix up between chalutza and grusha, the divorce and chalutza, so therefore they put these boundaries. So that's basically, if you remember, we studied it on page 30, there is a concept of yesh zika. Yesh zika meaning that there is a zika bond, which means when the woman needs those yevamim, according to rabbinic view, that zika bond means that her relative prohibited to those yevamim, which means before the chalitza he was prohibited to them, but after they do chalitza, so that's the chidush of the Mishnah. It's go on in both sides. He is prohibited to marry her relative, and she is prohibited to marry his relatives. Page 40b. Who asu be'ima, he is forbidden to her mother, uv behemima, and to her mother's mother, uve'em avia, and to her father's mother, ubebita, and her daughter, ubebat bita, the granddaughter, ubebat bena, and the son of the daughter, uba'achota, and a sister, bizman shehi kayemet, as long as she is alive. Ve'ha'achin, the other brothers that didn't do chalitza, mutarin, they allow. Vehi asura, now the other way around, she is prohibited to his father, to his father's father, to his son, be'avi aviv, u'bibno, be'ben beno, be'achiv, u'ben achiv. So, just to refresh what we study many times, there is arayot, the biblical law, which is the mother with his wife, the mother of the mother, the mother of the father, the daughter of his wife, the daughter of the daughter, the daughter of the son, the wife's sister, the daughter-in-law, the wife of his father, the wife of his brother, and the wife of the brother of his father, when it's from the father. That's called arayot, biblically speaking. And then we go by shniyot, the next level, which is the mother of the mother of his wife, the mother of the father of his wife, the daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law of his daughter, the wife of the father of his father, and the wife of the father of his mother, the wife of the brother of his father, and that's what we study page 21, and the wife of the brother of his father from the mother. So all of that, it applies if there's something happened, for example, divorce or passing, in addition to prohibition of the wife of the sister of his wife, that it's applied as long as his wife is alive. So that's basically biblical. The prohibition of sisters is a biblical. The shniyot is a rabbinic. So the Mishnah put a general principle, which is mutar adam, a man is permitted bikrovat tzarat chalutzato, to the relative of the co-wife of his chalutza, ve'asur, but he is prohibited betzarat krovat chalutzato, that the co-wife of the relative of his chalutza, because then she is considering, Rashi explained that the same as the relative itself. Ibayalehu. So we ask a question: Gazru shniyot b'chalutza or lo? The second decree of arayot applied to chalutza or not? So the Gemara said, be'erva deoraita gazru bo rabanan shniyot. When it's come to the erva, biblical erva, the rabbi decree regarding to them, the secondary relative should be also considered as arayot. So I explained in my book, Rashi said here, klomar beishto de'ima ve'emima have erva deoraita gazru rabanan shniyot. So according to the Gemara, erva that prohibited by the Torah, you have this concept of shniyot de Rabbanan. Chalutza, that it's rabbinic, you have a doubt if it's a shniyot or not. So the question is, chalutza herself is also prohibited for the choletz, biblically speaking, and it's not only rabbinic. So the source for that is what we study on page 10b. That is disputation between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Someone who choletz livim tov v'chazar v'kidsha. So we have a disputation. What's the chiyuv al chalutza? If he's chayav or not. So the Rambam in Ilchot ייבום, halacha perak aleph, halacha yud bet said, I'm just reading the Rambam, וכן החולץ ליבים תור נאסרה, חלוצה היא וכל צרותיה על החולץ ועל שרחים, וכולן אסורות עליהן מדברי סופרים כשניות. It's all prohibited by the rabbinic law as the שניות לעריות. So it means that the whole idea of חלוצה, it's rabbinic, the שניות. So the Magid Mishnah explained the Rambam that that's the source from this Gemara. So basically the Magid Mishnah asked, so if you go by that source on page 10b, the whole issue of lo yivne, it's part of the negative commandment, chay ve'lavin, it's not rabbinic. So Rabbi Akiva Iger explained that if you go and explain that the meaning of the Gemara is only chay ve'lavin, but it's rabbinic, it's still a heavy issue. What we ask that if you have a kiddushin chay ve'lavin, it's not tofsim, it's not taking effect, which means that the whole idea of lo yivne is biblical, that's cause that the kiddushim is not taking effect. So basically the Magid Mishnah asked further that what we see in page 53, the Gemara said here that that kiddushim not take effect in chayavei lavin. So it means according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's biblical, it's not rabbinic. So therefore you have to say that the Magid Mishnah understand from the Rambam that the whole idea of bi'at chalutza is biblical. So therefore, the whole idea of shniyot bechalutzot is only rabbinic. So if you compare, if you juxtapose the relative of the erva in comparison to the erva to chalutza, so erva is rishonot, is biblical, and the chalutza is rabbinic. That's basically the view of the Rambam. But it's still, when you use the term erva doraita here, when you compare krovat isha in comparison to krovat chalutza, so you can say that the rabbinics apply solely to the strongest level, but not the lowest level. So I humbly think that that's what Rashi meant when he used the word klomar here, that Rashi followed basically the school of thought that you see later by the Magid Mishnah, that he hold that the chalutza prohibited by biblical term, and and by that sense the Maggid Mishneh disputed the Rambam. So you have to understand that the quandary in this Gemara, it's not erva versus chalutza, but krovot in exchange of krovot chalutza. And krovot shel erva you cannot say, you have to say that krovot, that it's erva to him because they are relatives of his wife. And that's what the Rashi meant, I think, the word beishto, that he said, אימה ואם אימה ערווה דאורייתא גזרו רבנן שניות, אבל בחלוצה, אפילו עריות דידי רבנן לא גזרו שניות בהם. The Maggid Mishneh, by the way, said that there are books who, the sources said, בחלוצה דרבנן, בערווה דרבנן. So he basically speaks that, unlike the Rambam, that all of that is rabbinic. Otherwise, you have to say that the whole idea of chalutza biblical is part of the Chayei Lamed, but you see the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe Menachman, when you have the Hasagot of Sefer HaMitzvot al Rambam, he disagreed. And he said there on Mitzvah Yudalet 14, and I'm just reading the Ramban, שנמנע החולץ ליבמתו שלא יבוא עליה ולא יישאנה, that one who did חליצה to his יבמה, he cannot have any type of relation with her, אחרי היא פרדה ממנו בחליצה. ואין העניין שיחזור עליה איסור אשת כך, כיוון שעברה מהם מצוות הייבום. The moment the ייבום was over, it's nothing to do with the brother's wife. שאם כן יהיה מחויב עליה כרת, כי חיוב ואשת הרבה לא מקום ייבום. That is, they have to be correct, and you see and can say that. So, והוא מחייב להאמין, והוא אמר, וכך יעשה לאיש שלו לבני בית אחיו, והוא בא פירוש בעלה הקבלה, כיוון שלא בנה, שוב לא יבנה. ובפירוש אמרו בפרק רבן גמליאל דף נון, נתן גט וחלץ, אין אחר חליצה כלום, that's over. אמר רבי יהודה, אמר שמואל, זה דבר רבי עקיבא, ואמר אין קידושים תופסים בחייבי להבין. So the Aruch LaNer explained over there the meaning of the Rambam, and basically he said it on page 10b, that he thinks the Rambam may be issue with the same as the Tosfot here, that therefore you see here that why these sugyot disputed one each other. But as I said, that I brought here more. I brought here the Rif and the Rosh and the Ramban and the Rashba and the Tur and the Emek HaMelech to go and explain what exactly involved here. Also the Vilna Gaon and Shulchan Aruch Kuf Samech Bet, Sif Katan Bet, follow also the Tur. So you see here a lot of discussion over this issue of Ervad Oraita. So Gazru B'Rabanan Shniyot. בחלוצה לא גזרו רבנן שניות. I see that we're running out of time. או דילמה לא שנה, you may say that it's no different, תשמע. הוא אסור באימה ואם אימה, ואילו אם אימה לא קטן, דילמה אין אותם על הודעה משום דקבאי למתנסר, והאחים מותרים. ואיתה אם אימה, הבא מן האחים מותרים דווקא באם אימה, אבל באם אימה ובאימה לא, ולתנה אם אימה ולתנה האחים מותרים בכולם קשיא. תשמע, היא אסורה באביו ובאביו וקטן, מיה אבי אבי מה אליו משום חולץ. The Avyalei Kalat Bno, the same way as the daughter, his daughter-in-law, his son. Ela Mishum de Mitna, the Avyalei Kalat Bno. Tashma ubiben beno Mailav Mishum Choletz, the Avyalei Eshet Avi Aviv. Lo Mishum Mitna, Avyalei Eshet Achi Aved Aviv. So the source is Amarha, Meimar Machshar, Be'eshet Achi Avi Aviv. Meimar allow a marriage between a man and his father's father, brother's wife. So a relationship is not secondary Ava at all. But she's considering the grushav of Aviv. Ameimra mokela bebar bra de Sava, the son of the old, which means the father of the choletz and the deceased. Yache ainu achiv uben achiv, tana achiv min ahav, vektane achim min ha'em. So he said, Tashma, the Tane Rabbi Chia, arba midivrei Torah, and I explained in my book a little more on this Rashi. They said, כלומר, לגבי אשתו אביין דאורייתא, we don't have time, וארבע מדברי סופרים, האב ובנו ואחיו ובן אחיו מדברי תורה, אבי אביו ואבי אמו, בן בנו ובן ביתו מדברי סופרים, that's רביניק, קטנמיה, אבי אביו, מה אליו? משום חולץ, ואב ילק על בנו, לא, משום מתנה דאב ילק על בנו, תשמע, אבי אמו, מה אליו? משום חולץ, דאב ילק על בנו, לא, משום מתנה דאב ילק על ביתו, תשמע ובן בנו. מה אליו? משום חולץ דאב אלי כאשת אבי אביו, לא. משום מתנה דאב אלי אשת אחי אבי אביו, והמימר מכשיר באשת אחי אבי אביו, המימר מוקים לה משום חולץ וכזבר גזלו שניות בחלוצה, which is the rabbinic, the second level of חלוצה, and for sure there is a Tosfot Yeshelim and Ritva here. wish to have more time. תשמע, ובן ביתו, מה אליו משום חולץ דאבי לאשת אבי אמו? לא משום ניתנה דאבי לאשת אחי אבי אמו, והגבי שניות דרבה לא גזרו, אלא אליו משום חולץ ושמע מינה, גזרו שניות בחלוצה, שמע מינה. So that's the final decision, so that the sages put the decree of שניות בחלוצה, both to prohibit the חלוצה for the relative of the חולץ, that is the שניות, ו also the חולץ, that for those relatives is also שניות. It means that in the Mishnah he didn't go to all of this. That's also the Tosfot דיבור מתחיל לשמע מינה, and I wish to have more time. We'll elaborate on that in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow.
Boyachem leshuloim malachai yeshuloim malachai